Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us. Now, the wheels of justice are turning, but slowly. Several suspects have been arrested for the assassination of Babita Deokaran, but answers remain vague. She was about to expose fraud and corruption at Tembisa Hospital, amounting to over 800 million rand. Now, the Democratic Alliance is demanding answers from the Gauteng Health MEC at today's legislature sitting. Let's get the latest now from eNCA Silindelo Masikane. Good morning, Silindelo. Very important session today. The Democratic Alliance leading the charge, saying they want answers from the MEC, the extent at which she knew about this matter and what was done behind the scenes.
Certainly so. We found ourselves here in the Johannesburg CBD at the Gauteng Provincial Legislature, where we are expecting a sitting to start at around 10 a.m. this morning. We know that the Premier, of course, will lead an address and then have to answer questions, but of course his cabinet as well. But to give us more context around why this particular sitting is quite important, I'm joined by the DA's Jack Bloom. Thank you so much for your time this morning, sir. Of course, we know some of the information that's been uncovered in particular by News 24 in terms of the investigations that Babita Deokaran had done and was uncovering, and the communication that she was having with her colleagues around the fact that it was quite critical for them to start not only investigating but basically holding those accountable for what really looks like rampant fraud and corruption. As the DA, what will you be posing to the MEC and the Premier essentially?
Well, I have an official question to the MEC for Health. I'm asking if the late Babita Deokaran ever asked an official in the Gauteng Health Department to institute an investigation. If so, who was it? And also, why wasn't an investigation done anyway? And I'm actually going to be asking the MEC for Health directly, why didn't she ensure that there was a proper investigation? Why did we have to wait a full year before News 24 did an excellent investigation uncovering unbelievable, extent of apparent fraud and corruption and wastage of money to the tune of 850 million rand. So, it's important that not just officials are held accountable, but politicians as well, and obviously the MEC for Health must account for her role as well.
We know the CEO of the Tembisa Hospital in particular has been suspended, but it does seem that there are some quarters that feel like this is a bit unwarranted. As the DA, do you find that it does seem as though officials on the ground are held more accountable as to the political heads?
Well, I think ultimately politicians must take accountability. If we go back to the Life of Sedimeni tragedy, Kodani Mahlangu had to resign or was forced to resign, but that was only after a long, investigation process. In fact, I think the problem here is that the CEO of Tembisa Hospital and the Chief Financial Officer of the Gauteng Health Department, it took 4 weeks before they were suspended. I think we need to have speedier investigations, and we need to have regular report backs. And they can't be done in secret. We need to know the results and what they found, and we need to see prosecutions. But today is really about political accountability of the MEC for Health. What did she know? When did she know it? And why didn't she institute a proper investigation a full year ago?
We know that the sitting, if I understand, started around 10 a.m. this morning. We are expecting a briefing from the Premier's office as well around lifestyle audits and particular investigations into the health department. As the DA, what are you hoping to hear, especially around lifestyle audits and this particular investigation into the health department?
Well, DA Provincial Lead Solly Msimanga has actually got a question which will be heard in the next half an hour directly to the Premier about lifestyle audits. So he's obliged to respond to the DA leader in the legislature about lifestyle audits. I don't know if he's having a separate conference to expand on it, but we do need to hear more detail, I think, of any investigation at Gauteng Health Department. Look, the Premier was elected 8 years ago. In his inaugural address, he said there will be an urgent turnaround, quote, urgent turnaround of the Gauteng Health Department. 8 years later, scandal after scandal, and he is the one who appoints the head of departments, and he is the one who appoints the MECs for Health. So I think the Premier has to be held accountable as well.
I mean, speaking about that, in terms of heads rolling, would we, as the DA, would you want to see the Premier possibly stepping down, the MEC as well?
Well, we've the DA has called for a motion of no confidence in the Premier on various aspects. You know, he's just failed in a number of areas, scandal after scandal. And I think, you know, depending on the response of the MEC for Health, and I think she also has to be held accountable. Look, I think the rot is everywhere, quite frankly. You know, it's not just the Health Department, it's the Infrastructure Development Department, it's the Education Department, which spent 430 million rand cleaning schools that didn't need to be cleaned. The wastage. Another question that I have to the MEC for Health today is about the Anglo-Ashanti Hospital in the Far West Rand, where they spent 700 million rand, and it's an abandoned hospital. They treated 100 COVID patients, and that was it. And they didn't even need to be treated there. So we've just wasted 700 million rand on an abandoned hospital in the Far West Rand. Accountability. I think, you know, in other countries people resign for far less, but there's no shame in this provincial government or the national government either. I think that we need to have a political tradition where politicians take accountability and resign or get fired.
Yeah. Just lastly then, Mr. Bloom, just how angry, just how frustrated should South Africans, Gauteng residents in particular, be looking at the millions that are being wasted on fraud and corruption when our healthcare system is basically in a crisis?
I think they should be very angry, because if you go to Tembisa Hospital, for instance, it's an overcrowded hospital, they're short of staff, they're short of equipment, and yet the CEO ordered 100 luxury leather armchairs, 5,000 rand each. You know, then there was a controversy over the skinny jeans, which is still to be resolved. He says it was for something else, but clearly something is drastically wrong. People are right to be very angry. They need to have accountability, and they must make sure that every money, every penny is spent on services, and we just see money being wasted away when patients are suffering every day in our hospitals.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Bloom.
Thank you.
All right, we will release Mr. Bloom for now. We know that in about 9 minutes, the Gauteng legislature will have its sitting today, and of course, some tough questions that the Health MEC as well as the Premier will have to answer.
All right, Silindelo, we'll leave it there for now. Thank you very much. That's reporter Silindelo Masikane out at the Gauteng legislature for us.